Welcome to the Open Apple Podcast, where we celebrate the Apple II. Whether you're a longtime user, a nostalgic visitor, or a newcomer to the community, join us as we share news and memories of Steve Wozniak's most famous personal computer.
Hey, this is Maginnis. What you're about to listen to is a famous lost recording, if you will. Quinn and I recorded this with John Morris leading into Kansas Fest 2018 because we were hoping to release it that week and kind of, go with his release of the Applesauce card. And that was the last recording I think that I did with Quinn, or for a long time with Open Apple. Had a lot of stuff going on and things were just, there was no more room in my life at the time for Open Apple. So at any rate, the other day, or I guess about a year ago now, I was going through some old files and I came across this file from Quinn, and it was an audio file that I didn't recognize and didn't have a date that made any sense, and so I started listening, and hey, it was the recording for this episode of Open Apple. So the information might be a little out of date, links and things that are for sale, stuff like that, but anyway, I think it's still a good episode, and we hope you enjoy. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Open Apple. This is episode 78 for July 2018, and I am your co-host, the first, Quinn Dunki. And with me, as always, is co-host, the second, Mike Maginnis. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing okay, Quinn. I think we're still co-hosts of this show. It's been a while, but
yeah,
glad to be back. And as we're recording this, number 77 isn't out yet, but I'm hoping to get it out for right before Kansas Fest so everyone can enjoy it there.
Yeah, and more importantly, we are in fact recording this just arguably hours before Kansas Fest. I don't know when you switch from measuring in days to hours, but we're like 96 hours or something from Kansas Fest. So yeah, that'll obviously be a hot topic, although of course by the time people hear this, it'll be after K-Fest. But
for this particular one, yes.
Yeah, so we're speaking to you from the past.
Hi, I'm Bill Budge, and you're listening to the Open Apple Podcast.
A big topic of conversation and a hometown hero at K-Fest this year will be John Morris, who is with us today to talk about his amazing new device, the Applesauce. Say hello, John.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
So, I think we should not bury the lead and dive right into that, because that's what everybody's thinking about. So to set the stage here, one of the holy grails of Apple software preservation has been how to preserve copy-protected software, because for anyone who doesn't already know, if you've been in a cave for 50 or so years, that the Apple used direct CPU control of all of the disk drive hardware, which allowed all sorts of arcane tricks for copy protecting software, everything from rearranging tracks to spiraling tracks to offsetting tracks by halves and quarters, and all sorts of mathematical nonsense, and also being soft sectored. You could shift everything around in that dimension as well. So it's a difficult problem, and up until now, our preservation solution has been to just crack everything and preserve the cracked stuff. But you lose a lot doing that. Often the cracked versions of games are missing levels, or missing title screens, or missing sound effects, and so on. So usually they have some rude 12-year-old boy's artwork on the front of them, and they're not family-friendly things. So what we would love is some sort of magic box that we can plug into a disk 2 that somehow magically zaps all of the contents of the disk in whatever format they are into a modern format that then can be preserved forever as is.
Now, it's true that 4AM is a magic box of cracking, but we can't really plug disk drives directly into him. So
yes, and there's only one of him.
That's true.
So so his approach has sort of been a great intermediate technology, I feel like, to this problem. He's been the hybrid cars of software preservation,
nice.
getting us to the ultimate better solution later on, hopefully, because he's been doing sort of stealth cracks where he cracks the software sufficiently that it can be preserved but doesn't remove any content or put 12-year-old boy artwork on the front, much as he may be tempted to do so. So, but back to that Holy Grail box. So, John, you came along and kind of out of nowhere, if I can say so, and produced this box. So, tell us how you got started on this idea and what the genesis of it was.
Let's see. So, yeah, basically I came up with the applesauce. Before I came up with it, I was basically doing imaging with EDD cards and, kind of going the what is kind of the traditional route. But I'm really, really lazy. And that is, it's a lot of work, doing it on platform and stuff like that. With the quantity that 4AM has done, I got to give them props. I mean, that is a serious amount of work. And that's not something that I was going to be able to do, let alone the fact that my EDD card behaved terribly. I mean, I was getting maybe 30% of the images would actually be good. It was more of a random number generator than anything else. And it's kind of like that with EDD. They're kind of they're a little hit or miss. When you get one that works, it works well. And when you don't get one of those, it's just misery. So out of pure laziness, I decided, well, how hard could this possibly be? And I've done a lot of protection schemes and stuff myself. I've been in the game industry since 1987. Kind of have been around a little bit, kind of understand the fundamentals of what need to go on. Not really a hardware person, more a software person, but I figure, how hard could it possibly be? So yeah, basically I kind of put together a little system, starting to talk to the floppy drive and looking over schematics and trying to understand, kind of reverse engineer how everything worked. And started putting together a device. And it's been, a little bit over a year now that I've been working on it. I mean, I have a day job, so really I only get a day or two a week to really work on this. But yeah, I kind of jumped out and decided, okay, well, I could just grab the flux stream as it's coming off the disk and, capture all of that and reconstruct it on the computer.
So is that, can you talk about what is it about the applesauce that allows it to capture copy protected disks and then allow those disks to be booted in their copy protected form? Like, how is it different than other types of preservation?
Well, it's a little bit interesting. Part of the way things were protected were, using systems that could not really be captured or copied by the Apple II. Things like needing to have tracks that are in sync, or having protections that purposely desynchronize the stream. Where basically they stop doing stuff, basically stop having information long enough that the floppy drive itself gets all confused and starts sending out random information until it finds its correct information. So it kind of desynchronizes your data that's coming in. So you could have a sector that's there, and then the next time you read it, it's not there, and then it's back again, and then it's gone again. And so they can kind of make it so when you're making copies and things like that, where you're trying to copy everything, but sometimes you're just not going to get it all. And so what Applesauce does is, at the level that it works at, things like desynchronizing don't actually matter to me, because I can see when the drive is freaking out and I can see when there is real data. And, Applesauce, since I'm using the original hardware, still gets the freaking out. It still gets this noise, but it actually exploits the noise in order to figure out how the disk was originally written. You read it a couple of times and you can see where there's changes in the stream, where fluxes no longer line up and their timing is weird and things like that.
Okay, so because you're connecting directly to the disk 2, you can get data and interpret it in a way that the Apple II itself can't. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yeah, I can look at everything with a lot higher resolution. I every sample that I get, when it comes to the disk 2, really you can have a bit happening every 4 microseconds or so. And the Applesauce will scan things down to about 125 nanoseconds is where it actually ends up rounding it to. It actually is scanning for fluxes at about 96 megahertz. It basically it can kind of capture the data with more accuracy than what can be done on platform.
Okay, so you're capturing like a very high res picture of the magnetic flux changes on the disk, which is high enough resolution that you can resolve everything else within that data. Like, is that accurate? Like you can resolve desynced bits or weak bits or whatever you need to within that data because it's so high res?
Yes. And, when it comes to things like a desynchronizing or weak bits protection, really they're sending random data, but as soon as the real data is there, it's sending the correct data again. Nothing is truly desynchronized. The synchronization is actually what's happening on the disk controller card in the Apple II itself. Just the clever way that nibbles are constructed, it's trying not to get too technical here.
Get technical.
Yeah, definitely. Please get technical.
Just the way the disk controller card needs to try to synchronize its information gets exploited. But I basically attack it at a level before that. And so even when the stream gets desynchronized, I can just find the bad bit of data that caused a desynchronization and throw that out and still have a completely synchronized stream after it.
I see. That's interesting. Okay, so you're cutting out, the Apple II and the CPU and also the disk 2 card. So you're talking directly to the analog board effectively in the disk 2, right? And so you've cut out like all the things that can get confused or exploited by copy protection. Is that accurate?
Correct. Okay. I talk directly to the mechanical floppy drive, which, actually ends up being really, really powerful because when you deal with most floppy drives and even more modern ones, they have so much of the logic actually built into the drive itself. Mm-hmm. But when Woz was designing the disk 2 and he sat there, throwing all these different parts out saying, oh, I'll take care of that with the CPU. I'll take it. And he kept throwing all this stuff out. It actually makes the perfect drive for doing something like this because it is so bare bones. There's nothing to interpret or get confused in the middle. You're just dealing directly with a head, passing in whenever it sees a flux change. So, doing it on the Apple II, while the Apple II can be crazy in terms of what is possible to do for protection, the disk 2 actually makes the problem a little bit simpler to resolve because you can actually deal directly to the disk.
Okay, that's cool. So I guess in case anyone might be confused, the way that this, as a user, the way it works is you plug the disk 2 into the Applesauce, and the Applesauce is a USB device you plug into your modern computer. Is that right? And then it rips an image into into the WAS format as a file on your modern computer. Yeah.
So what it does, there's kind of multiple steps to it, and at least in my mind, like the WAS files themselves and Applesauce are really kind of two different fronts. What the Applesauce does when it images a disk, when you tell it to give me a high res image, because it'll also do like really, really fast imaging of disks. If you have uncopy protected stuff, it's like 12 seconds and it'll image a disk for you. But when you get to the flux stuff, it will actually just grab all of the data on the disk wherever it finds it. It steps through quarter tracks and it just captures all of the timing information. So the number of nanoseconds that exists between all of the data on the disk. It captures that and actually stores that in an archive completely unprocessed. It's called the A2R format, and it is basically the Apple II raw format. And the files end up running about 20 megs, sometimes a little more. It all depends on the actual data that is on the disk, but they're huge files. When I was developing Applesauce, when I got to the point of, okay, you know what? I know that I can capture this stuff, and I know that I can, be able to write disk images out. But kind of the problem that we had was that there actually wasn't a format in existence that could do disk images the right way. That to be able to store exactly the data that would be needed to be able to encompass all types of copy protection. DSKs throw data away, and nibs are horrific because they throw out, they literally dump like 20% of your data on the floor, and so there were a lot of formats, but nothing that could actually deal with disks that were copy protected. Okay. And so that began my effort of developing the WAS format. Although originally it was called A2D. So I got to give a hat tip to Jason Scott for coming up to me at the last Kansas Fest. It was like 11:30 at night, and he walks in. He's like, "That new format, you got to call it .was." And I looked at him and I went, "Okay." He's like, "No, I'm serious. You got to call it .was." I'm like, "Done, man. That's brilliant." So, props to him for the name. But basically, what I developed was a file format that could contain everything. And of course, nobody likes to have new file formats and new information. So, then began the process of selling it into people, trying to show what it could actually do. And once you have the bits don't always matter when it comes to copy protection. There's a lot of it that's how those bits are treated. And so while the WAS, itself is a file format, the specification actually goes into a lot of detail of how you need to treat the data, because you have to be able to replicate all the weird glitchiness of the disk controller cards and stuff like that. So, we clean all these weak bits out, but a lot of protections relied on that because, they needed it to see it changing, because if you do a bit copy, it cements those bits into place as real data. But we need to erase that because we need that stuff to be able to change.
Right. So, that's interesting. I'd like to drill into that a little bit, because I think that's something a lot of people don't understand about file preservation on the Apple II and why it's such a unique challenge, and why there are so many formats. Like you said, there's DSKs and POs and 2MGs and all these different disk image formats. And I think new people coming into the Apple II are profoundly confused by all these, over on the Commodore 64, there's D64s and everybody just uses that and it's a solved problem. But on the Apple II, there's all these formats because they're all compromises in different ways, because there's no one simple way to solve the problem universally. And I think, like you said, I think people don't necessarily understand that it's a disk image on the Apple II can't just be a list of bytes as a file. Then this is the contents of the disk, because it's, you have to capture the chaos. Like you said, a lot of copy protection, like weak bits, are a great example of that. It's sort of impossible to capture them because the software is actually looking for those bits to be random. It's exploiting the radio frequency noise in the analog board. And so that you really can't capture that. So if you're going to write a format, it has to be more like an active format, right? Where the WAS format is telling the emulator or whatever how to interpret the position and the timing and the relationships of the bits, not just whether they're 1 or 0. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So there's a big set of rules. The disk image, the specification for the WAS is I think I'm up to like 16 or 17 pages long, but because there are a lot of really, really weird things that copy protection does. As the battle was going on, they came up with all kinds of clever ways to not be able to detect this protection and stuff. And like you said, it's about timing, it's about randomness, it's about positions of data when you are skipping through tracks. You have things like the electronic arts protection. They actually have tracks 5 and 6 are actually one big fat track, and when they read this, they then sweep the head back and forth across this area and keep doing checksums. It's literally moving the head while it's reading data. So putting that kind of stuff back in and having it be perfectly bit aligned, is a huge problem. But with the WAS format, basically you could just say, well, this whole area here, yeah, that's all just one big track. You can specify that kind of detail within the WAS format, and then as long as everybody follows the rules when they're making their emulators and stuff, that are laid out in the specification, the software just works. It passes its copy protection checks. We've got well over 1,000 WAS files that, pass all their checks, and they don't know that they're actually, running virtually. So.
That's fantastic. And that's a good segue into, so you've managed to get WAS support implemented in probably most of the popular emulators, right? Do you have a list of those?
Yeah, it's still growing. It's Virtual 2 was really the first one where somebody else was doing the implementation. I built a quick implementation into Open Emulator. Virtual 2. MAME has support for it now, although I'm not sure that they're actually complete yet. Micromate has support for it. And there's a couple others that are also working on it. It's in discussions for Applewin. I've been going back and forth with them for a little bit. And so, there's a lot on that front. And then there's also currently 3 devices, basically hardware floppy emulators to plug into your real Apple II. So, load up the whole Apple II, disk library on SD card and be able to boot them protected on, your real hardware.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I didn't even consider that. So which SD card or flash memory devices have support for it now?
None do yet.
Okay.
None that are available yet. There are a couple that are working, but people are still working on getting final designs for it, and right now I'm not blabbing on who they are because they're trying to keep it quiet.
Fair enough.
Everyone's trying to beat each other to market, but just so you guys know, there's other people working, so you should hurry up.
That's good to know. Yeah, that'll be really the final link in the chain. Like once you can copy a WAS file to an SD card and stick it in your whatever your SD card reader is for your Apple II, then to be able to boot Choplifter or whatever in its original unmolested form, that'll be fantastic.
Yeah, because emulation and everything is cool and all, but I'm a real hardware guy. Mm-hmm. I love having, I love playing on my real Apple II. So, unfortunately, I can't afford most of the games these days because they bring ludicrous prices on eBay and stuff. And, some of this stuff is just genuinely so rare that, you're never going to get your hands on it. So, the end goal for me is, like you said, I just want to be able to play Choplifter on my Apple II and not worry about it.
Yeah. And even if you're trying to buy originals, who knows if they work? You might buy a new old stock shrink wrapped copy of Lode Runner on eBay, and you stick the disk in the drive and it delaminates and it's ruined and it doesn't work anymore. I mean, these disks have a very, they're at the end of their lifespan, as we talk about a lot. So who knows?
Yeah. And that's really, kind of a big reason of why I'm pushing hard on this. I mean, like 4AM, he's been doing a fantastic job of, preserving stuff, just making sure that things don't get lost. But, I kind of, a lot of the thought about Applesauce, originally I was like, I'll build, maybe 10 of these things. But then it kind of came the idea of, there's so many people out there with stuff, if there was a way we could kind of, almost democratize this imaging process, be able to get it out to people, and having it be useful. If like, hey, you know what, when other people have images out there, you can write them to floppies too. So it helps, you wanting to play stuff, but also tries to, I kind of want to increase the pipeline of us being able to capture things. Mm-hmm. Because the discs, they absolutely are rotting away. I got some great pictures, when Applesauce does its imaging, it'll display images of where the data is. And some of them you could just see giant blotches on the disc where it's just, completely demagnetized. And, so you can kind of, you can see a lot of that stuff on there. So, it's definitely time to be doing this.
Yeah, so sort of on that subject, I've heard that Applesauce has some ability to correct or resolve lost data. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, it's funny because, the whole imaging with Applesauce, the imaging part, that was easy. Getting it so that I could grab an image of the disc is, that was like 6-7 weeks of work to do that. My work since then has all been about the concept of how are we sure that this data is correct? Mm-hmm. Which is insanely hard problem because so much copy protection tried to make your disk look like it was broken. So it turns into, how do we know that this is the real data when they're trying to make it broken? But, actually we can tell when it's really real data, and so it's, it's basically this validation process, because within Applesauce, I don't build specific things like, okay, this is for capturing this disk or this company's software. It basically uses a teeny tiny bit of machine learning. So as it's sitting down and looking at this disk, it starts determining structures, figures out, this person's actually using like a repeating structure of data here. It's a 16 sector format. And so it kind of figures things out as it goes along until it gets to the point where it basically tries to reverse engineer how the software is working. And, so when it goes through and does this, there's times where, data can be iffy. And so it knows how to, like take a track that isn't always coming in correctly, but there's times where the data does work, which is actually very, very common. These drives really make a lot of mistakes sometimes. But, it kind of looks at all this stuff and analyzes it and starts going, we got good copies of sectors here. Let's stitch all these good sectors together. And, it does say, it looks on quarter tracks next to your data. I mean, it just hunts all over trying to find what was actually written to the disk and what to reconstruct. And if it can understand how the disk was validating its own data, standard DOS style stuff, they had a little checksum on there. It's only a little XOR checksum, but it's something. It can start validating everything that's in there. And when it doesn't add up, it can actually start looking at the timing of the bits and search for things that, oh, hey, there was an unstable bit sitting in this nibble here. Okay, these bits look stable. What should the value of this be? And kind of back it out using the checksum and recalculate what should actually, what the correct value should be for it.
I see. So, that's interesting. So you can reverse engineer a lot of what would have been there from the checksums and other high-res information that you have.
Yeah, you can only do it so far. I mean, when you have an XOR-based checksum, really how many bits can you change in there before you'll come up with the correct value?
Right.
So, it really tries to use a lot of logic, but actually, can get to the point where it says that it's going to take a guess. But then it'll always kind of flag that as saying, okay, I've guessed at this. And so basically this whole analysis process, this is what happens when you want to take the A2R and create a WAS, because the WAS format itself is what's referred to as a solved format. There's nothing for the emulator to figure out. It's just read the data that's on here. It automatically figures out exactly how many bits long the tracks are, and all this kind of stuff, and basically can just feed all that in, so it can make perfect looping circles without ever needing to change anything.
Okay, so one of the big takeaways here for me then is that the WAS is the real star of the show here, right? I mean, a lot of hay is being made about capturing the high-res flux data, but there have been other attempts to do that, CryoFlux and EDD and similar devices. But I think it seems like what you're really bringing to the table is the WAS format and the heuristics that are in it and the logic behind it. That's really what's going to make this a success, right? Because
Yeah. I mean, the hard part of the problem is what's going on in the software. But the hardware is what is giving me the proper data that I actually need. I was not able to, I couldn't figure out what was going on with the CryoFlux in looking at documentation. And, I've had all these other people that talk about these different things and, but I knew exactly the kind of data that I needed. And so, the hardware is kind of built specifically for that, and trying to get away from, trying to find high-end, expensive PC drives from the 1990s and modifying them and going through, all this craziness, where the disk 2, I mean, you can find them all day long if you want, it's, they're all over the place. They're relatively inexpensive. So, kind of using that as a starting point really helps to, reduce the cost on it and kind of builds, kind of constructed what I feel is an ideal way to image Apple II disks. And it happens to be from an Apple II drive.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because you mentioned earlier how the hard part was knowing if the data was right. And that's been the problem with existing solutions, EDD and CryoFlux. People have been imaging EDD disks, but then they're sort of useless. You have this big magnetic flux image file, but you have no idea if it's right because there's no way to boot it or check it. And so as people have tried to add EDD support to OpenEmulator and various things, people are finding that actually most of the EDD images out there are not correct and they're not usable. Because, they just did one pass over some weak bits or whatever and called that the data, and then that was it. Again, it sounds like WAS is really solving that part of the problem, which is the critical part for Apple II.
Yeah, that's the part that, 99% of Apple II users are going to care about is the WAS stuff.
Very cool.
There's a lot of people that are like, oh, I want to use WAS files, so I need to buy an applesauce. And I'm just like, you don't need to buy an applesauce to use WAS files. They're two separate beasts that just, I needed one to be able to get to the other so that I could play Choplifter. That's all.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I've been dominating the questions here. What's on your mind for John?
No, it's great. I've been enjoying the back and forth here. You'd mentioned the democratizing of the imaging process and making sure that this format gets out there. And have you enlisted Jason for that? Because that's what he does.
Yeah. We have definitely had some discussions. For the most part, I've been kind of hermited away, as I've been going through the process, because I've been working on trying to solve the problem. Up to this point, it hasn't really been ready for public consumption, and still, it's a work in progress. I expect that there's still, months more work to do on the software front. So it's still ongoing. It's by no means solved, but it does do quite a bit of stuff right now.
So, so the Applesauce devices, they are available for purchase now, or are you still producing the first run? What's the status there?
So I made the first run. I basically opened up a wait list for the first run, which was going to be 100 units, and they were all accounted for in about 16 hours. And I've basically finished off the last of the Applesauce devices this morning. The last couple of days, I've literally put down more than 1,500 solder joints.
Wow.
So, putting they're already been tested. I think I got another 15 or so devices that need to go through burn-in and testing process still. But yeah, things are starting to get boxed up. As I'm trying to get packed to leave for Kansas Fest in the morning. So, really, really down to the wire. But there is a second wait list up. I am going to do another run of devices. Probably going to be, September time frame or so. I got some family vacation I want to do and take a little bit of a break. But then I'll be doing another run. So I already have 50 some odd names on the list for the second run, which really was primarily overflow from the first wait list. So yeah, it's out there. It's just everything is getting reserved before I can actually put together, say, hey, here they're for sale. You want to buy them? Everything's just getting pre-purchased right now.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's the lesson we always give our listeners on this show is when these devices come along, you got to buy them because someday you're going to get tired or be unable to make them anymore, and then they'll be gone forever. So people got to get them while they can.
Yeah, and one of the things, when it comes to the deluxe versions, the deluxe version, the big thing on there is that I have DB19 connectors on them. PCB mount, female DB9 or DB19 connectors. I was able to gather up 300 of them, and I cannot find any more.
Yeah,
I have scoured everywhere for them. It's possible I could get some manufactured, but I'm looking $10,000 plus to do that. So the chances of me doing that are pretty much non-existent.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the floppy emu guy did that for the male ones, and because he had the same problem, he couldn't get enough connectors to meet the demand, and he ended up having a run of them made in a factory in China, and yeah, he had the minimum order was like 10,000. So, yeah, he has the world's supply of male DB19 sitting in his closet.
Yeah, well, he sold them all to IEC after he kind of grabbed his couple of thousand that he needed. But he just did another run of them too,
really?
a couple months ago or something. So yeah, good stuff. But I'm a software guy, and one thing that I've learned, in doing this. I've never really done hardware production like this. Making 100 of something is really hard work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that burns a lot of new hardware folks for sure. Yeah, making one of something is easy. Making even 20 or 100 of something is a very different thing.
Yeah, it is. And for the most part, all the boards, I'm having them all manufactured for me and stuff like that. But attaching DB19 connectors, I wasn't sending them off to China. I was like, it's not like people really use a lot of 3.5-inch discs with the Apple II. So there'll probably be a few deluxes, but not many. And yeah, we're like 90% deluxe unit. So yeah, I really misgauged that.
So you're having to hand solder all those DB19 connectors. Is that what's happening?
No.
Yes, that is exactly what's happening. Yeah. So. So that has not been fun, but that's kind of real life when you get out there and start doing products and you think you know what you're doing. Yeah, you don't.
I think if the next run ends up being a higher price, I think everyone would understand.
Yeah, well, it most likely is going to be. So
yeah, no, it's totally fair. There's a lot of labor there.
So Quinn, you may have asked this, and if you did and I missed it, I apologize. But so you'd mentioned that all the software emulators work with the WAS format. Have you talked to Rich Dreyer about getting the CFFA 3000 to work with this format?
I have tried. I tried contacting Rich a couple of times, didn't get a response. I got in touch with Dave Lyons. And he was supposed to get back to me, and I never heard back.
Oh, no.
So, I love my CFFA 3000. I'd love to get WAS support on there. But yeah, I'm trying. I think it would be great, especially since there's a lot of people that just picked up a CFFA, and it'd be kind of a bummer if they have to buy something else in order to be able to use WAS files. But
yeah, I'm in that boat. I bought one in the last run because there was rumors it might be the last run ever, and so I bought one. It would be a shame if I end up switching to WAS, which I'd like to do, and then end up never using it.
Yeah. So if you're out there listening, I'm here to help any way I can. I'll throw code down, whatever needs to happen. I'm here to help see it through. So
well, and I'm not a hardware engineer or anything like that, so maybe I'm missing or not seeing the true complexity of it. But couldn't that be solved with a firmware update in some of your code? Or is there more to it than that?
Yeah. A lot of it probably could be a software problem, but I don't know how close to the bone they are. There's things like injecting these fake bits. There's ways to do it in a very performant style, but honestly, I don't know how they have their firmware broken out. I would guess that they probably could do it with a firmware update, but I can't say for sure. I just, I don't know what they have in firmware versus on the CPLD versus, and how they're pushing anything through. So,
because it sort of feels like, as you start shipping these things and getting them into the hands of the users, part of driving the adoption here would be, pushing to get rid of these other formats, the DSK and the nib files that aren't actual, true images in the sense that you were describing. But we're never going to do that because like the CFFA 3000 is hugely popular and because it's very useful. But as long as those things are still relying on the older images, those are just going to hang around forever and kind of pollute the stream, so to speak.
Yeah. I don't know about seeing DSKs go anywhere. I do see a very practical use for DSKs. Maybe it's not like you can stick anything copy protected on there, but you there's a lot of things where it works out really well. Nib files, those can die in a fire. They're just they don't deserve to be around anymore. It's just so unreliable the way they work. It's almost random chance that they do, and it has to be just that the disk itself was structured in a very specific way. Usually just straight up sectors. Because there's time warps within nib files. Every time you hit the end of the loop and jump back to the beginning, it's not actually a track length that you have. So, it could be in the middle of reading a sector, and then all of a sudden it's reading a different sector.
Okay.
And so you just have to hope that you have, 16 good ones that exist there uninterrupted. And if you do, then a lot of times it'll work, as long as the software actually is, doing its job and making sure that the data that it's reading is correct, then it can, retry it and get the good one. But once you kind of get away from those standard structures like that, it's really, it really gets problematic.
Okay. Now those high-res images, the disk images, have you thought about, I don't know, putting those on a T-shirt and selling them, or maybe a poster? Because some of those are really cool and like geeky artwork.
Yeah,
like the Spire disk images. Yeah. I would definitely wear that on my person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The Spire disk ones are pretty cool, and it's like when you get into a lot of early sub-logic stuff, and really the crazy formats really were happening early on in the copy protection thing, so you get into like early sub-logic stuff. Oh, they got some you image it and you go like, it's like double spirals intertwined with each other and stuff like, it's just some crazy stuff that I've seen. I haven't really thought about putting those onto shirts or anything like that. This is all Applesauce, and all this stuff really is just kind of a hobby gone wrong for me, which is how I do most hobbies. It's like,
sure.
Oh, I'm into rebuilding old Porsches. Let's do this. And all of a sudden I'm running around doing restoration work for people. And it's just like, what am I doing? Why am I custom assembling fuel injection systems here? Why, I don't have good boundaries in life. I think that's part of the problem. I just don't know when to say, this is a hobby, John. You don't need to do this,
Right.
Yeah, I feel you on that one. I have the same problem. Mike and I were talking about this before the show, actually, that, when I'm not looking, somehow my hobbies all turn into businesses.
Kidding.
Now I've got 28 things going and just don't have time for anything anymore.
I don't know. Every time I see you post up a picture with that lathe, I'm like, oh, okay, what's going on here? Oh, yeah. I need to get me a good metal lathe. Yeah.
That's a slippery slope.
Yeah, it is. And you don't make it any easier for me either.
Okay, so one last question for you, John. One of the other things that you do is repair some of these really early Apple IIs, the revision zeros and things like that. Which one has been your favorite to work on? Do you have any memorable revision zeros that you fixed?
There's been a lot. I've definitely slowed down on it recently just because all of my hobby time has been going to Applesauce.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a time where I'd be getting, 2-3 revision zeros a month.
Wow.
It's just like, wow, I didn't know there were many of these still kicking around.
Me too.
But there, a lot came through. There was one that came in that, I started getting into it, and it, a lot of them, people do some mods and stuff like that. Most of them are pretty typical mods. And this machine that came in, I'm like looking at these mods, and I was just like, I don't know what this guy's doing. It is like the craziest thing. There's extra wires. He had wires going from the keyboard directly to slot 6.
Okay.
And it's kind of like, wait a minute. Why would you ever want to do something like that? Going from the 16-pin connector for the keyboard directly to slot 6. And so I'm just like dumbfounded. And I ended up digging up like the original, the discard that he had in there, and it was like taking apart the keyboard and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, he's soldering lines to the shift key. Okay. And that's what he was actually using an unused pin on the 16-pin connector, and that was tied to the shift key. And I was like, well, shift key mod maybe, except that it's going to slot 6. And then look at the discard, and he was actually using unused pins for disk controller, and he had the wires going up into the ROMs. And when it was all put together, if you powered on the machine holding the shift key, it would boot 13 sector. With no shift key down, it would have 16 sector. And I was like, that is the most brilliant mod I've ever seen. I mean, I was just, I'm so used to just, the usual, oh, here's color killer circuit. Oh, here's the extra, colors, since the revision 0 didn't have all the same colors as, revision 1s and up. And, you'll see like, a shift mod for trying to do keyboard stuff. But this one is just, shift key to change what discs you could boot. That was just fantastic. And I actually ended up acquiring that unit.
Nice.
And left all those mods in there because that, because most of the time people come in and they're just like, undo the mods. I want it back to factory, which, which I'm willing to do, but it's like, that is some risky stuff. Those boards are old, and it is so easy to lift pads and, so it's just, but yeah, that was probably my favorite, in terms of, kind of the history. And then it ended up that it was, one of the guys that was really active in the early days of Call Apple and stuff like that. This was his personal machine. And so it was neat. There's a little bit of history behind it and some great mods. And
nice.
Oh, yeah.
All right, John. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show today.
Well, thanks a lot for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Great.
I didn't get to say Boo Atari. Oh, wow.
Well, there you just did.
All right. And many of us will see you at K-Fest in a couple of days.
Okay. Yep. Looking forward to it. It's going to be a good time.
All right, John. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
All right. So once again, thanks to John for coming on the show. And normally this is where Quinn would introduce the news to us all, but I think we're going to go ahead and skip that this month. What do you say, Quinn?
Yeah, we had a little siesta there from the show, and we're sort of a little bit out of the loop on the news anyway. And Retro Computing Roundtable scooped everything anyway.
Sure.
So yeah, so let's revisit an old favorite segment. How about?
Yeah, let's talk about Soft Talk.
Yeah,
and we don't have any music for that, so
no, nor a pithy British lady.
No, she's not available to do that for us. So we'll just pretend that we hear that. And so this month, we're going to talk about Soft Talk Volume 1, Number 6. This is from February of 1981. And the theme is all about the Apple and cable TV. There's a portrait of Bill Budge, which is always cool. Some Pascal talk, and of course the bestseller lists, which are becoming very popular themselves.
Mm-hmm. So the first page inside is a full-page ad, and these are always my favorite parts. Mm-hmm. These old magazines is the ads, and it's from. So we're still in the era here of mostly ads for games have no screenshots, which I still find fascinating that people would buy games sight unseen with only declarations of high-res graphics as the selling point. But what I'm going to call out in this particular ad, so this is an ad for what's the actual name of the company? I'm struggling to find the name of the company in this ad, which tells
I think this is SSI, right? Computer Bismarck and.
Yeah. Okay. It's an ad for a couple of different war games. It's very strange that I have to search to find the name of the company. There we go. So yeah, way down in the fine print, it is for SSI. There's a couple of things I love about this in the fine print at the bottom where it's telling you how to order. So the first is that it informs you that the discs, that the software comes on mini floppy disk drive.
Oh, wow.
Or if you under the system requirements, it says mini floppy disk drive. So I love that at this point, this is 1981, so people are still referring to 5 1/4 as mini floppies, presumably in contrast to 8-inch floppies. And they've spelled disk with a C, which I also love, because I remember this period where there was this long period where people hadn't decided, should we be spelling this with a C or a K at the end?
Right.
And I was always firmly in the K camp, but some people hung on to disk with a C for quite a while. So including SSI apparently. And they also list that they take MasterCharge, which is a credit card that hasn't existed for 30 years. So that's also funny.
That's adorable. Okay. And then we've got, of course, the table of contents and then the contest winners. And for those of you who remember the last time we talked about Soft Talk, I think the contest was the Who is Lord British thing. Because I guess back then his identity was still unknown.
Apparently, yeah, I didn't actually realize this, that there was some period where, nobody knew who he was.
Yeah, me either. But there's a $50 reward that has been announced to anyone who could identify him. And they have a clue this month, and it's that he attends the largest university in the state of Friendship, because that would tell you anything at all.
Yeah, I guess the state of Friendship, is that like one of the state mottos or something?
Probably so, yeah.
Like New Jersey is the Garden State. Is there a Friendship State? I don't know.
There is.
Florida is the Sunshine State.
Texas.
Texas. Yeah, it must be. I was going to say it must be Texas because he's from Austin. Yeah.
There was some argument or some discussion about Apple had a couple of months previous to this, actually maybe 2 months previous, gone public. And so there's some talk about the stock prices, and they were taking predictions on what the stock would be come July 30th, 1981. Most people seem to think it was between the $30 and $50 range. God, wouldn't it be great to be able to buy it at that price?
Yeah, imagine.
Somebody really optimistic, said $215.25, which is still great.
Still a bargain. Yeah.
Right. And
I guess these are $1981 though, yeah, so I guess that would actually be like $300 or maybe $350. I don't know today. I don't know how to do inflation math, but
yeah. And somebody had predicted that it would drop down to 80 cents per share, which wouldn't come actually until about 1997.
Yes, the dark years of 58 Power Max.
Yes, and Michael Spindler and Gil Amelio and people like that. So next up we have Exec Online Systems, Adventures in Programming. Al Tomervik wrote this.
Just before we get there, let's see, what page are you on? I'm still on page 2. So there's a. I wanted to call out this revolutionary programs from Continental Software ads.
Oh, yes.
I think we mention this ad every time because they were advertising a lot. This is a half-page ad, which I think this is the first time we've seen a half-page ad from them. These are one of the ones that they start out really small, and it's got the American flag clip art all the way around the border, and. Still, what I like about this ad is it's very emblematic of the sort of Wild West nature of the software. So he's selling a game called LA Land Monopoly, which is clearly a blatant trademark ripoff of Parker Brothers, now Hasbro's Monopoly product. And then after that, he's selling a game called Hyperspace Wars, which is clearly, from the description, a port of the old Unix ASCII Star Trek game that everybody ported to everything. Stealing trademarks and having the gall to sell public domain software, both I find extremely amusing and were pretty commonplace at the time.
Yeah, also USA. Yes,
nothing sells like American flags, apparently.
I'm looking at the address in Google Maps. I've adopted that habit of yours because I think it's really cool. And it's definitely a house in Rancho Palos Verdes. So.
Yes, I actually know that area. It's a very upscale section of Los Angeles and very, very shushy. And so this is clearly somebody working out of their house.
You should stop by there, knock on his door. I'd like to buy some of the software you have for sale in this magazine I found.
That would be amazing, actually. Whoever lives there now would probably get a kick out of that.
Maybe so, or go what do you get off my lawn?
Yeah, actually, probably, yes.
So Advanced Business Technology is selling a 10 key, looks like, for the Apple II. I think this is probably before maybe Apple introduced theirs. No price available on that, though. But it features actual photographs of a product in an ad, which is sort of weird for this time.
Yeah. And as is tradition, every time we talk about an ad for a numeric keypad, I have to ask, who was buying all these numeric keypads? Right. There was 50 of them for sale every issue. And I never knew anyone who had one or wanted one. I get the idea. It's supposed to be great for entering 1,000 numbers in a spreadsheet or whatever. But I don't know. I just don't know anybody who bought these things.
Yeah. I guess it makes sense because, everybody, the Apple II is known for having been driven by sales of VisiCalc. So, the spreadsheet and all that, I think maybe.
Yeah. If I was a data entry person, I guess in some basement somewhere, it would be the best thing ever.
Well, and Apple even built the 10 key into the Apple III. So there's your Apple III mentioned for the month, ladies and gentlemen. Got it past Quinn. She didn't even see it coming.
No, kudos on that one.
Okay, so on to Exec Online Systems. This is an advertisement. Well, I guess it could be sort of advertorial.
Yeah, it kind of is. Yeah,
it's a profile of Ken and Roberta Williams back when they were young and hippie in 70s. Look at that beard on him.
Yes, that is an amazing picture. It's actually a really nice full color picture, which I'm sure was not inexpensive at the time. Mm-hmm. And very young Ken and Roberta Williams.
Nice write-up of some of their early software, talking about paddle graphics and tablet graphics, and talking to Roberta about her Mystery House and the graphic adventures. A nice little article, I think, well written, but not too salesy or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my two favorite parts of this are where they describe how the graphics were done. I think there's been a lot of discussion about what tools they actually used, because I think their software predated Graphics Magician, which is a very similar type of art, vector art package. But it sounds like they were using paddle graphics and some things of their own devising. And the other thing I learned from this actually is I didn't realize that Mystery House, I've always thought of it as this sort of weird thing that helped start the company, but it single-handedly, Mystery House paid for their big fancy house in the woods. Mm-hmm. So I did not realize that. Apparently that game sold very well.
I think this was right after they started hiring people too, because the last couple of paragraphs they talked about opening an actual office space, and they'd hired 2 employees in Coors Gold, and and they were, I think at the time, this is when they were still publishing some business software, because there is some talk about porting a couple of games and the financial decision software over to Apple III, which was the business computer, of course, and all that. So before they'd kind of gone all in on the games.
Yeah, it's interesting. He pleads for 6502 programmers to move to Course Gold, and I wonder, because when I read that they had, as soon as Mystery House did well, they bought a big fancy house in the woods and packed up everything and moved out there. I thought, wow, that's a crazy decision for a software company. Even today, where people work remotely a lot, it's really critical that your company be located in the midst of a talent pool of engineers, and that's why everybody's in the Bay Area or in Los Angeles, or in Europe you got to be in St. Petersburg, you got to be in Barcelona. You have to be where the pools of software engineers are, because it's very hard to get people to relocate, and those are within cosmopolitan areas that are desirable to live in. So I can only imagine how difficult it must have been for them to get other programmers to buy into their hippie dream of living in the woods.
But think of it this way. If they had never done that, we wouldn't have had those awesome soft porn photos in their hot tub.
That's true, yes. The world would be a worse place without that photo.
All right. So next page, we've got an ad for some stock market tracking software.
Boring.
Exactly. And then,
it was boring at the time, still boring.
Yeah. And then there's that ad that we talked about last month that it's for Easy Writer, Easy Mailer, et cetera, and it's a lot of white space that they've basically decided to fill up with a blue grid. So we weren't sure what that was about, but it's back this month. Information Unlimited Software. Talk about a boring name. But you could buy that from them.
It is amazing how generic a lot of these early software companies' names were. Like there was a lot of like Software International and Computing Systems Limited and things like that. Just generic word salad of techie sounding words.
Yeah, that was appealing back then when they were trying to, technology.
Yeah, I guess a lot of those words weren't generic at the time, maybe.
Yeah, all 2001-y, spacey soundy. So
yeah,
makes you think of cold white rooms with spinning tape reel-to-reel backups and mainframes that are malevolent in purpose.
Yeah, that might have been part of it. Actually, they're trying to conjure up an image of a big, impressive sounding institution. Because companies full of mainframes and white men in lab coats would have had names like that. So
I like that.
If you're trying to make your company that you're running out of your bedroom in Ranchos Palos Verdes sound impressive, maybe that's why you name it that way. And I guess the other interesting thing I think is they didn't have to worry about Googleability, which is
that's true.
Primary driver of company and product naming now. It's why they take the vowels out of everything.
Right.
It has to be Tinder and whatever, and that's why they do that. Or they give things gibberish names, like they do that a lot with cars now. They give them sort of gibberish word names, and a lot of it is so that you can Google it. I mean, if you tried to Google Universal Software Limited or something, like you're going to get nothing.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah.
Okay, next page we have the open discussion. These are the letters. I didn't see anything too interesting in here, but we do have an ad for Synergistic Software. They're selling a game called Odyssey, the Complete, spelled Pleat, app venture, which I think
is very strange sentence.
That's definitely Googleable.
Yes, complete app venture. That's hard to parse.
The game is available only in Integer Basic for $30. What I like about this, again, it's got the hand drawing of like some sea creature chasing a diver. But what I like about it is that they actually have the programmer's name here, and also weirdly, it's above the company name in the ad, so it's not Synergistic Presents blank by Robert Clardy. It's by Robert Clardy of Synergistic Software. So
that is interesting, actually. Yeah, I didn't actually notice that. I do want to call out a little bit about the open discussion. So we're into the letters to the editor sort of section here, and there's a theme to all of these letters, which is people want more negativity in the software reviews. Which is, I think, actually pretty fair criticism of a lot of magazines, Soft Talk especially, but a lot of them, where there was just sort of this, I think the media is viewed as part of the community of the businesses, like everybody's trying to work together to lift up the industry as a whole, rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing. And they were all friends too. I mean, the people writing the articles are friends with the people down the street writing the software, so they're not going to be inclined to speak too negatively about it. But then I think the consumers are trying to treat this as an objective sort of news source, and they want objective software reviews, which is, I think, an interesting contrast. But there's a particularly odd exchange though, which I wanted to call out. So one of those writers with that viewpoint says, I particularly like the reviews, but I am suspicious that they all seem positive. It suggests that reviews are used to sell ads. And most of them are signed, Bob Smith, Kansas City or whatever. Right. This one is signed Dr. Randall Engel, Department of Psychology, University of South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina. Oh my goodness. So he put his CV in the signature, which deserves to be trolled, and troll it they did. So there's a lengthy reply here, but the key sentence is I don't know if there's Mrs. Margot Comstock replying or what, but the reply says, as a psychology professor, you should recognize that the vicarious superiority people feel when reading a cutting negative review reveals their insecurities. The frailest part of the human is still his mind, not his body, and his mind is not strengthened by an overdose of negativism. and goes on to say why they just prefer to write positive things. But I thought that was a really odd and interesting exchange, and certainly not, I don't think, something you'd see in a magazine today.
That's funny. I like that. That's well done.
Yeah.
I do also think that, they figured out early on that it behooves them to write positive reviews, because when you write bad stuff about companies, the companies tend not to invite you to their events,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't make the software available to you early. And if you want to review it, you got to buy it. And so there is kind of this, pay to play. And I don't want to, you want to be fair, but you don't want to have somebody insulted and have them, retaliate. But how do you write a review then if it's terrible? Do you just not write the review, So it's this is sort of an early playing out of soft talk, trying to find a balance there, maybe.
Yeah, and that's very much still true today. I mean, certain industries are worse than others. I mean, fashion magazines are certainly not objective. I mean, they're just all, glowing prose about every new designer or new, line of clothing or whatever. And even within software, video game magazines are certainly very much that way. It was, back when I was in console gaming, it was a running joke that all video game reviews, the range, they would all rate games, in various aspects on a scale of 1 to 10, but the range was all like 8 to 10. Like if you got a 7 on something, that was just like the worst game ever made. So it's just sort of a running joke that, it's the same thing happens today. And it's like you said, it's all the forces that you said. It's sort of pay to play, and it's sort of like, well, we need to get invited to the launch events, and these are lifestyle magazines. They're not objective, hard hitting news reporting.
Right. So next we have an ad for CompuMath, and I think this is the first ad that we've seen for educational software that I can recall, at least one that's aimed directly at kids. It's got a little sort of a black and white chalkboard motif, and it's got the mathematical operands, the plus minus, the addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. The Apple does this superbly. How about your kids? And actually has some screenshots of something as incredibly boring as math.
Yeah, actual screenshots, which is nice. Like, this is actually quite a nice looking product for 1981, and they paid probably good money to have those screenshots in there, so that's nice.
Definitely, it's $49.95 from Eduware.
And I also do like that this is sort of the leading edge of that marketing technique of guilting parents into being convinced if they don't have technology, their kids are going to do worse in school than their neighbors' kids or whatever. There's this sort of yuppie kind of helicopter parent pressure marketing technique that is very heavily used now, and I feel like this might have been the start of that.
Yeah.
The implication being, if you don't have an Apple II, then your kid is going to lose out to Bobby down the street for admission into Yale or whatever.
Your kid's going to be selling gas to Bobby while he, smokes crack in the bathroom.
Exactly.
This issue obviously was for February of 1981. Taxes are right around the corner, so Howard Software Services, a full-page ad for tax preparation software.
Yeah, Got to shout out Howard Soft every time. As we recently learned, Howard Soft is still in business.
It's a big deal.
Yes, they have continuously operated and maintained their software since at least 1981, including migrating all their data formats forward across PCs, and now I think they're on the web. And amazing. So I don't think that achievement gets enough press. That humble Howard Soft continues to operate.
Yep, no kidding. That's impressive. Next page, we have Trade Talk. I didn't see anything all that interesting November 20th, 1980, Sirius Software became an official California corporation. Congratulations to Sirius Software and what's his name? Gabelli.
Nasser Gabelli.
Nasser Gabelli, I think, was kind of the force behind that. And of course, every time I see the name Sirius, I hear that Plasmania sound.
Yes, Sirius presents Plasmania. That is forever etched in my brain. Yeah, you hear that at 6 years old, and you're never going to forget it. You're done. It's like your very first phone number; you'll never forget.
We have another ad for Synergistic Software. This for Higher Graphics too, and to their credit, it is graphic software, so they actually have screenshots in the ad.
Yeah. We've looked at previous issues selling graphics packages that had no screenshots. So you're just buying it on faith.
A full page ad for Microsoft for the 16K RAM card with the very first Microsoft font, I guess, for their name down at the bottom in bright red, everything else in black and white.
Yeah, I always have mixed feelings when I see that really old Microsoft logo because at the time I kind of liked Microsoft. Like they made Olympic Decathlon, which I
before they
really
were evil.
loved. Yeah, but then like since then there's been 30 years of hatred built up, and so yeah, I have mixed feelings when I see that logo.
I agree. Okay, next page we have the Pascal path. It's an article on how Pascal works. Have you taken a dive into this, Quinn?
I skimmed into it. It's basically, it's a good treatment of the Apple Pascal environment, which is a deeply weird thing. It was sort of like an alternate branch of technology that the Apple II could have gone down and didn't. At the time, everybody was pushing UCSD Pascal, which was sort of a weird blend of programming language and operating system and user environment, and they blurred the lines between all those things. And it was an interesting effort. It was sort of like I consider it the Canon Cat, or the what was the Apple II version of that thing. With the split space bar and all that.
Wasn't that the Canon Cat?
Yeah, before it was the Canon Cat, though, when it was an Apple II card. What was that thing called?
Oh, I have no idea.
Anyway, just a completely different paradigm for computing environment, and I think it never really caught on. I think for the best, because Pascal is okay for what it is, but sort of terrible. All right, moving along.
We have market talk news, new products and industry news, I guess. Let's see, what do we have here? Online Systems is introducing high-res cribbage. So if you are a cribbage fan, you can now play it on your Apple II for just $89. What? That can't be right.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. The prices were all over the place on this early software. So maybe it was $89. Who knows?
Well, oh no, I'm sorry. So that was high-res cribbage is $24.95, and then in the same paragraph, it switches over to superscript. So that's what's $89.
Okay,
I missed that part of it. SoftTalk did not always do a great job of dividing that stuff up. We were just talking about Microsoft. They have introduced an Applesauce version of Typing Tutor that you can get for $19.95 to learn how to type on your Apple II.
I actually had that.
So you were a Microsoft girl.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah, my dad bought that, I think, shortly after we got the Apple II Plus. And I actually used it a few times. I actually did kind of learn to type on it a little bit. It was a good program for learning to type. I mean, it was not a game, so I sort of hated it. But I did actually boot it up and use it a few times.
Sure. Quinn, what is Technical Analysis Group? I don't understand this ad.
Yeah, I looked at this one a few times, and there's a line image of a guy that looks like an accountant or a bookkeeper, sort of exasperated, buried under paper. So maybe is it tax software or it's business software of some sort? I guess it's like statistics software, because it's talking about stochastic percentages and HAL momentum indexes and CBIT demand.
Really boring stuff.
Yeah.
Guaranteed to fall asleep while you're reading this ad.
Yes. The tagline on the company is the Commodity Analysis Group.
You can send $10 to them, and they will give you a demonstration disc of the software, which you will then take to your local computer store. With this disc is a coordinated hour-long tape cassette, which describes the programs and functions as you see them displayed on the screen. I would kill for that tape to hear that.
Yes.
So this looks like a sort of a sales pitch to buy something that will tell you how to buy something.
I think it's business or finance. It's like high-end financial software of some sort for analyzing businesses, but I don't know. It's a strange ad. Yeah,
there's no mention of the actual price of the full software package.
No.
Or even a way to buy it. All you're doing here is paying them $10 for the demo disc and cassette. So
yeah, that's a good point. So that suggests they're going high end, like this, like they're trying to get $1,000 for the software or whatever. So they're trying to create an image of it being really high end.
Have a weekend in Hawaii. Just come listen to our sales pitch.
Exactly. Do you want a condo? You do.
Yeah, that's right. Next page, we have an ad for MicroStand, which is a professional stand for your Apple II or TRS-80 Model 1 hardware. Just $32.95 to, I guess, help you, keep the monitor off your floppies, it looks like.
Yeah, it looks like it's got a mid-shelf, so you can still slide the Apple II out, and the floppies will remain suspended. So
okay.
Some innovation there, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit. Apple II winners. Here are the winners.
It looks like this was a contest run by Progressive Software, whose address is a post office box in Pennsylvania, so I'm guessing not a very large company. But they announced some winners. One of the I do like something about this ad, which is one of their software packages is called VU number 3, and it is a VisiCalc utility program that appears to convert data to and from VisiCalc, which I find interesting because this was in the days before copy and paste and XML and other standardized text formats. This was a huge problem. And so it created a market where there was these programs that all they did was take data from one program and imported it into another. Now, they make the bold claim that you can take data from any program that is first put into a text file and load it into VisiCalc. So I would like to now see if they can get my high scores out of Choplifter and into VisiCalc. But they say any program. I don't know. I'm going to take them up on that.
Also, of interest, or what caught my eye anyway, was there's this thing that they've mentioned called the Lipson light pen, which I wonder if that wasn't intentionally named to sound like the Gibson light pen.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Around the same time. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I bet you're right.
So I don't know if Progressive Software ever did anything else, but that VisiCalc utility costs $70, by the way. So.
Yeah, I was just going to say, talking about crazy prices, which I bet this utility is 20 lines of BASIC that opens a text file and spits it out into a different type of text file. And and they are charging $70 for that turkey. Shame, Progressive Software. There they are with the generic names again, Progressive Software.
Yeah. The book. I think we talked about this last time. We've moved on to page 20. This, I think, was one of those big, thick books that lists, every known possible hardware and piece of software for the Apple II. Oh, gosh,
those things, yeah.
Like thousands of pages long, printed on really cheap paper that turned brown in like a month and started falling apart.
Yeah, like the computer shopper of the 90s, right. Those things, they were phone books of every piece of crap you could buy for your PC.
Yeah. And the ones that have survived are now interesting just, because you can see what was available when and who made it and things like that for historian, for that sort of research. But at the time, you didn't have Google or the internet.
Yes, so. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they were literally phone books of products because there's no other way to know what's all the stuff I can buy for my PC.
Right. Muse Software has a full page ad, and it looks like now they're using screenshots.
This is a really nice ad. I mean, this blatant missile command ripoff. Speaking of IP theft,
ABM, not
yes, ABM. Yeah, it looks like a really nice, actually, implementation for 1981 of missile command. Based on that screenshot, I would buy this product.
Me too. Yeah,
good on them.
I don't remember ever playing that one.
There was an actual missile command port that was quite good, yes. Which I did play.
And they made a product called DataPlot, which turned numbers into graphs and charts and things.
Yeah.
Boring.
I always wonder if anyone used these also, because these are like the number of keypads of software, these data plotting things that everyone made. Because, nowadays we use that type of software to go into a PowerPoint slide, which you then show on your laptop in front of people in suits. But to do that at this time, you would have had to bring your Apple II into the meeting and set it up. And then everyone would have to look at your little 15-inch monitor or whatever. So did anyone ever do that? Or how did people use this type of software? I don't know. Anyone was a business person in 1981, let me know.
You just hauled around your Apple II and the monitor.
Yeah, I don't get it. What did people use this stuff for?
All right, we have Apple and cable TV growing up together. Now, we talked earlier about the overly optimistic and positive stuff that sometimes gets promoted, and even in the past, you and I have talked about some of these articles. The main themes of the soft talk, where they find an Apple sitting in an office somewhere and they tenuously tie it to how important it is to the business.
Yes.
And I think this is
desperately trying to show how useful these crazy new computer things are.
Right. And I think this is definitely a case of that. There is an interesting mention of, this is right around when TNN started the cable news network, which I believe became CNN. June 1st of 1980 was when that was launched. And there's a mention that I guess they had Apple II number 412 that was still up and running at the time that this article was written. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and this board set that they're talking about is actually kind of interesting. It's a two-part system. The first one is lame. The first part of the system is a board that you put in your Apple II that makes the video output into actual NTSC, not NTSC-like. So apparently, according to this, they were never able to plug an Apple II into video recording equipment for broadcast because the signal isn't right. The signal isn't quite NTSC, so it didn't work. So this board fixes that problem, produces an actual NTSC signal. And then the other board is an actual Genlock, which is pretty cool for 1981. Yeah. So this was a way to actually overlay Apple II graphics on top of a live video signal, so they list examples of companies using it for rolling credits and things like that. And I think we've all seen that style of credits from the 80s where it would be like, solid yellow fuzzy text in a crappy font, sort of scrolling awkwardly. It's kind of what video overlay looked like in the 80s. And so, yeah, people could have done that with an Apple II with this board, which is pretty cool.
Down in the corner, before we move on here, is an ad from a company that I despise because I can't figure out how to pronounce their name.
The Dawkins Corporation? Is that what?
Well, it's Dakin and then the number 5. So I don't know if it's Dakin 5, Dakins. I don't know. They were based out here in Denver. And in fact,
that's not an S. Oh,
no, that's a 5.
Oh, now you wrecked my brain.
I told you. They were based out here in Denver. And in fact, I drove by their old office building one time because I was bored on a Sunday or something. And it's now a medical school, or I think something like that. But if they were still there, I was going to yell at somebody for coming up with that name.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It just messes with I see their software products, and all I can think of is the name now.
Yeah. It hurts to look at. It's a very cool logo, though. It's like a D drawn out of horizontal stripes, solid, and then like a -5 in the middle of it. It's a cool logo.
Okay, next page, we've got sort of one of those, we've got the wrap up of the video board and CNN, plus there's kind of one of those accompanying articles on the Apple being used on the local level. Again, I think more about how it's sort of being integrated into the newsroom, very tenuous links here and there. And, we have a depreciation program for Apple owners.
Yeah, this is sort of interesting. It's sort of the sign that Apples have been around long enough now that people are thinking about depreciation.
Yeah. If companies wanted to get rid of, I guess, their Apples, that was a way to do it.
Yeah. And then we got Roger Wagner assembly lines, of course.
Part 5. Did you dive into this at all?
I did not. But it did occur to me that at the time, learning assembly language this way must have been glacially slow because he's rightfully so introducing you very gently into these, tricky concepts. So he's only introducing a couple of instructions and a couple of assembly concepts at a time, but these articles are a month apart. So you would learn some tiny little bit of assembly language in a really helpful way and then have to wait a month for the next lesson. So I very much love having Chris Torrance's re-edit of all the Roger Wagner articles, and learning assembly language from that book is fantastic. That's a great way to do it. Learning it from these articles must have been torture.
Yeah, but you learn it really well because you have plenty of time to absorb it and do it again and practice.
You get a whole month to practice the branch on equal instruction.
So at this point, they had covered JSR, RTS, INC, DEC, LDA, STA, and a bunch of similar commands. So moving definitely through the basics. And of course, it's Roger Wagner, and he's got a great writing style that feels very personable and relaxed, and you're still learning.
Yeah. Yeah, I should say we talked about the letters to the editor earlier. They were basically two groups, which might have been intentionally that, they choose which ones to print. But yeah, the two groups were people complaining about no negative software reviews, and the other half were all people raving about how great Roger Wagner's articles are. So he's clearly the star of this magazine.
Image Computer Products. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I have to also say he's also the keynote speaker at Kansas Fest this year.
Yes, that's right.
Shout out to that. Of course, by the time people are hearing this, they already knew that because maybe they were there.
Image Computer Product, another fabulously bland and generic name, is selling Apple Disk Fixer. I don't think that's a physical thing. It looks like if you have a bad disk, this is supposed to help you go in and look at the sectors and try to pull data off. And I don't know how useful these things actually were. There were a number of these things that guaranteed to help you suck data off a bad disk.
Yeah, this just seems to be a sector editor, which I guess if you really know a lot about the DOS 3.3 and 3.2 formats, you could use this to recover data. But
or just pirate software.
Yeah, that ad is misleading.
Across from that is an ad for the computer station, which appears to be the unfortunately named Ditherizer.
That is a terrible name. The Ditherizer.
It basically, I think, did early image capture on your Apple II. You could buy a version that came with a video camera and a black and white Sanyo video camera, and then graphic dumping. So some interesting stuff there. Of course, as expensive as you would expect it to be. The Ditherizer 2 was $300. If you wanted the camera, it was $410. If you wanted both, you could get it for the low price is $650. Mm-hmm. And then the software to manipulate all that tended to be about $45 per package, depending on which version you wanted.
Yeah, imagine $700 to take the worst digital photo you have ever seen,
and embarrass your kid for decades to come.
Yeah. This is definitely people would buy something like this just because it's a way to have a digital photo. Like that's how hard this was to do at the time, which I think is pretty interesting that people pay $700 just to be able to do this at all.
Next page, we have an ad for what looks like a discount software producer, Spectrum Software. You could action adventure games, entire series, $29.95, generically named, available now. We don't.
Yeah, this is the most boring ad I've ever seen.
For games. I mean, really, guys? Come on.
Yeah.
Across from that, Sirius Software has an ad for the action software for the Apple II, which includes both Barrels, Star Cruiser, and Cyber Strike. Did you play any of those, Quinn?
No. The names sound familiar, though. Maybe I did, and I don't know. These are the types of games from this period. These are the types of games that in the mid-'80s you would have had on one disc that had a pirated copy of like these would be file cracks with like 30 of these old games on it or whatever. So I probably had them, but don't remember.
Probably like 400 copies of it on different versions of those.
Yeah, Sabotage and Lady Tut and all those games that you had on every disc.
Yeah. Next page. Oh, yay! A little bit of gender stereotyping and that sort of thing.
Yeah, of course.
An article on the tale of housekeeping computers and how women use computers at home with their housekeeping tasks. I mean, let's just call this what it is.
Yeah. Yes. The only thing a woman could possibly use a computer for is menu planning, which they highlight.
Right. Every now and then it pops up and tells her it's time to change the vacuum cleaner bag and iron her husband's shirt.
Exactly. Yeah, that's very helpful. I always forget to do those things.
Well, we'll have to get you one of these, Quinn.
Yeah, exactly. I have an Apple II. It never occurred to me to use it for that. Maybe I'm missing out. That's
hilarious. Another ad for Sirius Software. It has the same background with a weird sort of spaceship at the top, and but this one is for Easy Draw.
Yeah.
It goes with. It's called the Poor Man's Graphics Tablet. Good for them for describing something they make as the poor man's version of something else.
It's interesting that they use the exact same spaceship image for both ads that are unrelated.
Right.
But it's not like a logo of the company or something. It's just sort of a spaceship.
And this one's not even for games. I guess on the previous ad you could play the spaceship, and here you get to draw it.
Yeah, something like that. It's a weird sort of attempt at branding. I'm not sure what's going on with that spaceship.
Let's see. Next page is an ad for the online systems aforementioned high-res cribbage. Online at this point, I think, was still avoiding their screenshots. This is hand-drawn stuff. I don't know how interesting a cribbage screenshot would be, but I don't know, at least that way you know what you're getting when you buy the game.
Yeah. I assume that they just didn't do it because it was expensive to get an image printed in the magazine. I don't know.
The other half of this page, I got to talk about this for just a minute, is an interaction between the Apple and the homemaker, where it asks what.
Oh, good heavens! Oh, this is awful. I hadn't seen this. Now I just threw it in my mouth a little.
How to plan their day, and I assume that there's probably some husband mode where this can be programmed and then passworded so it can't be changed. I don't know. I'm just imagining I just went blank on the Handmaid's Tale scenario going on with the Apple II here. My God.
This is some sort of interactive planning your day. How many planning? Oh my gosh, I can't even. This is terrible.
Okay, well, moving on. Microlab has a full page ad here for the Data Factory for $150. There's the Mini Factory, $75, and a Mini Data Upgrade for $90. So if you bought something for $75, you could pay $90 to upgrade it so that you could have the same functionality as a $150 one. I'm not sure how that works.
I don't remember any of this software, but I remember these ads though. Like, so at the top is the Data Factory logo with the forklift holding up the text, and at the bottom the Micro Lab in that high-tech 80s font with an arrow shooting out of it. Sort of like, I think they must have ran with these logos for a really long time because I remember them from Compute and various other magazines.
Microlab was around for a long time. They put out a lot of stuff, as I recall.
Yeah.
Some of it was really good.
Yeah, that's good branding. Their branding is definitely imprinted in my 8-year-old brain somewhere.
Okay, and then we have an introduction to the modem. This is part one, I guess, of a multi-part series by Jeff Mazur. Where he talks about what a modem is and how you can use it to your advantage. A little glossary of terms for the newly BBSers.
Yeah, it's actually a good list. There's a lot of jargon around modems, which I think I'd forgotten how much jargon there is.
Full duplex, half duplex, couplers, all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah, auto answer, asynchronous baud rate,
RS-232.
Frequency shift keying. And this was the early days. This was before Z modem and Kermit and all the other layers that went on top of all this stuff.
We have an ad from Timac, who I think for a while I know Timac just made rip-off, the knockoff 80 column cards and printer cards, and it looks like that's exactly what this is. I don't know, this double DOS thing seems sort of interesting. A piggyback board that plugs into the disk controller so that you can select between 13 and 16 sector disks. So sort of a card version of what John was talking about earlier.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that is clever. Yeah, it plugs right onto your Disk 2 card.
It just has a toggle switch.
Yeah, and it looks like, I see, Leia, it looks like you pull off the ROM chips, you stick this board onto the sockets, and then you put the ROM chips back on top of this thing. And then it does exactly what John's hack was talking about. Yeah, so you can switch the ROM lines to 13 or 16. That's actually kind of clever. I give him a little credit for that.
Definitely. Okay, page 36. An ad for The Mill by Stellation, which is a plug-in 6809 board for your Apple II. Now, I know that CPM boards were hot at the time because they allowed you to run all this business software that was already out there.
Yeah.
What would a 6809 have done for an Apple II, Quinn?
Yeah, that is definitely a solution looking for a problem. I mean, the 6809 was a fantastic chip, really a great CPU. It was in the TI-99 series and other things. But yeah, putting one in an Apple II, you're really only doing that because you want to try playing with a 6809 and hack around with whatever new toys. I can't think of a single practical use for that.
I know that, versions or pieces of that go for quite a bit on eBay, and I don't think I've seen a full version of like a complete package of the Stellation 2 on eBay in quite some time. But these days those command quite a bit. And other than for just the historical, like I have this rare Apple II thing that plugs into an Apple II and I do nothing with, I don't know why someone would collect something like this.
Yeah, historical curiosity, I think.
It sold at the time for $275. They go for a lot more than that now.
Yeah. So we do have to talk about this BBS list on this page. So
that's what that is. Yeah, I didn't even see
Yeah. So this was a huge problem back in the day that I think that still, like, I still have emotional scars from this. Because the thing about BBSs is you had to know what the phone numbers were, and there was no phone book for BBSs. And so people would try to fill that gap with lists like this in a magazine. But it was such a hard problem because, these 99% of these BBSs were run by, teenagers in their bedrooms. And so these numbers would go up and down all the time, and BBSs would come and go every week. And so these lists were always out of date. And, I remember when I bought my modem from a local computer store back, when there were computer stores, and the salesman had a list of a small handful that he knew about. And so he gave me that list. It was a handwritten list from the salesman who sold me the modem of a few. And even on his list, I think 3 of the 10 worked or something. And I remember sort of jealously guarding that list and frantically updating it every time I learned of one that worked. And sometimes you'd call one and there'd be no answer, but that didn't mean it was down. It just meant it was offline at the moment because, the kid was grounded and he wasn't allowed to use the phone line or something. Right. So you keep trying periodically to see if it really was down, and you never really knew. And some of them were just busy all the time. So you weren't sure if they were operating or if they were just really busy. And so, yeah, these lists of BBS numbers were kind of a big deal.
Yeah, there were times when I would call boards that I didn't even like, but I would call them because when you disconnected, they would pop up with a list of other local boards that you could call with descriptions, and then I would print those out, and I had like several of those little 3-ring binders and Trapper Keepers filled with like numbers, and they were highlighted, and those are my favorites, and the crossed out and stuff like that. So there was quite a bit of effort involved in staying online at the time sometimes, especially like I lived at that time period in Los Angeles. So there were dozens of numbers around for me to call at any given time that were, within my local exchange. Cause it got really expensive. Even if you were in Pasadena and you called out to Pomona or something like that, you paid a lot of money for that call.
Oh yeah.
So, that was all a big thing. I can't imagine living, in some small town where you got nothing local and maybe only 1 or 2 that are, within your area code, and who knows how long those are going to be around. It was tough.
Yeah, you can't see because this is radio, but I'm raising my hand right now. That was exactly my problem. I grew up in a small city in Canada, and so occasionally you'd see a list like this in a magazine, or Cracked Software would have BBS listings on their crack screens and so on. But they were always in the U.S., and that was just obscenely expensive. There was no way I could call those. So, and as you said, I was lucky if I could even call one in a neighboring area code for how much it cost. And so, there was, in the city I grew up in, at any given moment, I was lucky if there was 2 operating at a time. Usually there was one that everybody kind of knew about or whatever. But once you got into the inner circle of users, then it was okay because people would tell you when numbers, when BBSs went up and down, and you could kind of be in the loop. But getting in that loop at first was really hard.
It was challenging. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Uphill in the snow both ways, kids.
That's right. You don't know.
Market reviews. These are like little software mini reviews. It starts off with Apple Galaxian. We talked earlier about ABM, which is actually mentioned next. is the ripoff of Missile Command. Apple Galaxian was just Galaxian on your Apple. I don't know if
it's a great game. That was such a good port of that game.
Yeah, it was distributed by Broderbund, and I don't know if they were big enough at the time to have licensed it.
I doubt it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was not a licensed copy of the game.
Certainly, these little Star Trek clone makers could fly under the radar, and not have a problem. And later on, certainly, it became an issue when companies got big and started attracting the attention of entertainment lawyers.
And things were still pretty compartmentalized internationally as well. I mean, that trademark would have been owned by a Japanese company, and they probably at the time weren't paying too much attention to what was going on in the U.S.
Well, this was actually written by someone named Tony Suzuki of StarCraft Japan. So,
he was in Japan. Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
And then published here in the States by Broderbund.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I think this stuff's really started to matter in the later, like mid '80s, when Atari started sort of buying the rights to distribute a lot of these titles from Japanese companies. So in the U.S., everybody had to now face down Atari if you tried to, make a Pac-Man clone or make a Galaga clone or something like that. Suddenly, Atari owned all of these rights over here.
We'd mentioned ABM again, and the reason that the screenshot, I guess, looks so good was because it was by Silas Warner, of course.
Of course.
There's a review of Phantoms 5 by Nazir at Serious Software, so that's pretty cool. I loved that game once I figured out how to play it. That was one of those where you put it in, you're like, what is happening here?
Yeah. The other thing kids don't know is you had to read the manual.
That's right. And if you pirated it, you may not have a manual.
Yeah. I had a lot of pirated games that I never figured out. Like I didn't know what I was doing.
Yep. You just mash buttons and hope it does something interesting.
Yeah. First thing you do is push all the keys one by one to see what they do, see if you can figure out what they do.
Soft Tapes, it was selling a copy of Crosswords. It's a disc with 24 crossword puzzle games in it. I guess it's not a lot of replayability there, but then it becomes like, well, how do they make it so hard that it lasts forever, but you don't want to make it too hard so that people won't play it, but you don't want to be too easy so that they finish the whole disc in a week? I don't know.
Although I guess now that I think about it, I'm not a crossword person, but I guess you playing a crossword on a computer would have been kind of a good thing, because you don't have to worry about making mistakes and erasing things or whatever.
Sure. True.
I don't
know. Next page we have definitely a step up in advertising from online systems. Way to go, guys. You really brought the game to this one.
Yeah.
It's to Superscript, though. It's not to a game.
No. Full page ad for Superscript with color. There's a 2-color image of a superhero type dude.
With a SS on his chest, which may not have been a good decision. But,
italicized too. Yeah.
Little
pro
bit,
tip. Yeah, pro tip: stay away from the italicized pairs of S's. That's kind of verboten, if you don't mind my saying.
Well done.
I'm on the show. It's true. I'm here for the jokes, people.
Yes.
You couldn't get Carrington, so that's fine.
Quinn will have to do.
Yeah.
The Market Talk reviews.
Actually, one more thing. I do want to shout out actually that Superscript is a great name for a word processor.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Like it's actually done as 2 words, Superscript, and there's a double entendre with the formatting type, and I don't know. I guess it would be terrible if it didn't actually do Superscript as one of the formatting types.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, as a name for a word processor, bravo.
Yep. And again, guys, stay away from the lightning bolt S's. Just a little close there. The Market Talk reviews wraps up with a talk about Ultra Checkers. So if you like checkers, that was a game to play. And an ad from Southwestern Data Systems. That was a company that was around for a while, and they put out a lot of learning and documentary stuff, I think. But their big thing was ASCII Express, which was the software that allowed you to do stuff with your modem on BBSs. And it came in several different versions, and I had ASCII Express, and I loved it. It was one of my favorite programs. I used it like crazy because you could do save what they called macros, which were scripts. So when you dialed your favorite board, it would remember your boards and numbers, and then automatically run your login script, and pull up your mail for you, and a great program. And I think there are a bunch of different versions out there, and they've all been preserved pretty well. I don't know who you would call these days with that software, but
it was the heavy hitter for a long time. I think I used it also. I switched to ProTerm when that came along, because possibly mainly because it was mouse text, and I had a love affair with mouse text that continues to this day. Macros are amazing on PPSs, because it meant you didn't have to sit there and babysit the keyboard while screens loaded at 1200 baud. You're watching menus fill in. Like, you could hit one key and you knew it, and then the software would wait for the menus to load and cycle through everything to get to your email or whatever.
And if you were into software piracy over your telephone, there were these things called AE lines, which you needed ASCII Express for, and you would just call up an ASCII Express. Basically, you would dial this number, and it would just start downloading whatever game was loaded on the AE line. There wasn't messages and the typical stuff you would see on BBS. It was just call this number, get the software.
Is that what that meant?
Yep.
Dude, you just blew my mind. I had seen AE lines advertised in crack screens and stuff growing up. I never knew what that meant.
Yep. It was basically just, and I think a little bit later it got slightly more complex, where you get like this menu of, whatever disks they had in their bank of floppy drive connections. But that's all it was.
Wow. I had no idea. Wow. Jeez. You just blew my mind, dude.
Woo.
Well done. I just learned something new about the Apple II in 2018.
I guaranteed that Quinn will be on the show for at least a few more episodes.
Yes. Well, a few more minutes anyway. We've got to wrap this one up.
We do. But we can't wrap it up without talking about this Bill Budge article. I'm just going to just mention the hair and the shirt, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, because you worked with Bill. Go ahead.
I did, yeah. Everyone needs to go to the archive.org link that will be in the show notes to get this issue of Soft Talk, just to look at the shirt that Bill is wearing in these photos. It is amazing. He is giving me life with this shirt. It is fantastic. It's charming set of photos of him as a very young man. I did technically work with Bill at 3DO. Our careers sort of overlapped. I didn't work directly with him very much. He was in a central technology group. I was working on specifically one of the game products, but I did end up using a lot of his code in that game. So we sort of crossed paths a couple times. It was a big company, so we crossed paths here and there. But
you abused your connection to him to get him on the show too. So.
I did, yeah. I abused a lot of LinkedIn third, fourth connections to manage to get him on the show.
A lot of Bill abuse going on here.
Yeah. It's still smarts that interview. We had so many technical problems, the one interview we wanted more than any other, and Skype just would not cooperate. Yeah, we managed to get 20 poor quality minutes of audio of Bill. Yeah, that was tough.
Yep.
But yeah, it's a nice little puff piece about him. Nothing too detailed, but just talks about why he likes writing games, and at this time he's working from home in Cupertino. He's doing some stuff for Apple, and starting up his own Budgeco stuff, and so it's kind of Bill in his prime, and there's some really nice photos actually of him with his setup. He's got the kind of the classic Apple II setup with the little black and white monitor on one side and a stack of drives on the other. And there's a photo actually here of him with 4 drives. So I'm not sure. He was duplicating his own disks for Budgeco or something there. But it's actually kind of impressive how crappy his monitor is. I'm surprised how good a software he wrote with that monitor.
Especially since it was 1981, which is, we'd moved beyond the era of the original Apple II at that point.
Yeah, that's got the raised power light there. So would that have been an Apple II then?
That would have
original?
Yep, it would have. Yeah, and this apparently was written about the time that Robot War had just been written by Muse, and he was really into that whole idea. It had fired his imagination for some upcoming titles, I guess. But fun little article. There's an ad here for Eastern House Software. They're selling an Apple II macro assembler / text editor. Those things would sort of flood the market pretty quickly around this time period. You could, these assemblers and script writers and things like that. And across from that is a sophisticated microsystem. $75 will get you a program that tracks your investments. Boring. On the next page, we have a Brutapun ad. No screenshots for this, but it's for the galactic saga, and this is the 4th title, which was called Tawala's Last Redoubt.
I have never heard of that.
Yeah, there was. I think the first one was called like Galactic Trader or something like that. And the aforementioned Apple Galaxian is for sale, so you could read the review and then buy it. We have the online systems ad for high-res football with the little blue drawing of the guy running with the ball, being chased by another person in footballish gear.
I do want to, so I actually forgot to call something out earlier, much earlier in the magazine. I forget which page it was, but they had a little write-up about high-res football. And it's a very sort of breathless piece about the graphics in this. And what's amazing about it is there's like a 3-page explanation where they talk about how the image of the player moves across the image of the field and does not erase the image of the field as it moves.
Oh my goodness.
And they're super amazed by this. There's like 4 paragraphs explaining the concept of sprites. And because I guess this, and they described it as the first program ever to do this. And they explain it at such length. It's really interesting to read. One of the sentences explains how the background is only invisible for the period of time in which the player is over that portion of the background. They explain it in gory detail. So yeah, it's, I guess that was a thing that needed explaining and was new at the time. So it just tells you how early into high res we are here.
Yeah. And then we're into their bestseller lists, which, as we said, became very popular in and of themselves. The number 1 business software was VisiCalc.
Of course.
The home hobby number 1 was DOS 3.3. I guess that was newly released at that point.
Just a quick sidebar. I saw yet another mainstream news piece the other day on some tech site about, again, what a colossal disaster VisiCalc was in the end, like how badly they flubbed that market lead that they had, that market position that they had.
So bad.
Pretty amazing fall from grace, that thing.
Infighting and bickering and distracted them. Yeah. So
they completely owned. Yeah, they completely owned the business market for a couple of years. Like they were Microsoft, and they could have been Microsoft, and then just choked.
Lotus just crushed them.
Yeah.
And the top 30. So we'll go through top 5 and the top 30. First was Apple Galaxian. Next was VisiCalc. Number 3, Flight Simulator. Number 4, High Res Adventure. Number 2, The Wizard and the Princess. And number 5, Super Invaders, another arcade clone.
I actually played all of those. I tried really hard to like Flight Simulator. I actually owned a retail copy of that. My father bought that for me, and the manual made it seem so interesting and exciting, so realistic. But then the frame rate was like 1 frame every 5 seconds. Yeah. It was so unplayably slow. The technology was just not ready for that. But gosh, I wanted to like it.
Yeah, I wanted that to be so much better than it was.
Yeah.
We have an ad for Beagle Brothers. I don't know if this is the first one of these that we've seen, but it's for the command chart.
No woodcut of the dudes. Is this before that?
I think this is before that. Yeah, I think that other stuff came later. And across from that is a full-page color ad for Akalabeth, World of Doom, and this is before Sierra started distributing it. So this was when Richard was doing this. I'm sorry, Lord British, because we don't know who he is yet.
Yes. Spoilers.
Right.
He could be anyone, Mike.
That's right.
Anyone in Austin.
Yeah. So I assume that at this time, if you had purchased it, this would have been the baggy, and then, the one that's worth tens of thousands of dollars now.
Yeah.
But it's a gorgeous drawing. I think it's a nicely designed ad visually. The letters are kind of in a bright yellow against a black background, and the demon thing that's rising up out of the lava and the pentagram is nicely done in red with glowing eyes, and there's this wizard that's sort of facing him ready to do combat. I absolutely would have purchased that.
Yeah, it's a very impressive ad, actually. Full screen, tons of color, big, bold, giant red demon thing coming out of lava. It's a very impressive ad, actually.
They paid a lot of money for that, I'm sure.
Yeah, this must have been very expensive. So I can see that must have contributed to the success of Akalabeth, I'm sure, they were putting marketing dollars like this into it.
Yep. And that brings us to the back page. The back cover here is another online systems ad for the high-res adventures. It has Adventure 0, Mission Asteroid, number 1, high-res adventure, and number 2, The Wizard and the Princess. Again, no screenshots here, but nicely written descriptions of what you get when you buy it. I played a little bit of Mystery House. I frankly got tired of watching the screen draw.
Yeah, the only one of these I played was Wizard and Princess. Wizard and Princess was one of the first games I got, and yeah, I played it a bit because of the graphics were quite pretty, but as an adventure game, it was pretty terrible.
Yeah,
I mean, sort of that Scott Adams of level of noun verb, really terrible parser. Puzzles are not well designed. Everything kills you at random. Like just not a good game, but it was pretty to look at.
And at the time, part of the appeal was the novelty of having something like this. It didn't have to be that great, I guess. Okay, and that also. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say you can kind of see where people get that impression of the conflict of interest between the ads and the articles, because these 3 games that are advertised on the back cover are the 3 games that they talk about in the profile that we saw earlier of Ken and Roberta. So, it's a little on the nose. Here's a full page color ad about those same games.
And that appeared a couple of times in this. We saw the ABM and then it was mentioned in the reviews, and then there was another ad for ABM. But that brings us to the end of another Open Apple podcast, I think. Do you have anything else to add, Quinn?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Well, thank you again, Quinn, for coming back. I know it's been a while, but we knocked the rust off, and we'll get back on schedule, I hope, here pretty soon. John, thank you again for joining us. It was great hearing about Applesauce and your adventures with those early Apple IIs. We appreciate it. And some of you out there will be lucky enough to get to see him at Kansas Fest this year.
Yeah, I will be there. I guess, again, this is speaking from the past. I was there. So thank you all to everyone I caught up with this year.
Oh, and when you get back, when you will have gotten back, I guess, you'll have to report on how it went at the Podcasters Pad.
Yes, I'm sure if not the next episode after this, or one upcoming episode may in fact be the giant group podcast that we often do at K-Fest. As is tradition, we sort of run that in all the main feeds because it's fun for us. So,
all right. Well, thank you, Quinn.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. See you soon.
Bye.
This has been the Open Apple Podcast. Find more episodes, read our blog, or send feedback by visiting us on the web at www.open-apple.net.
I didn't get to say Boo Atari.
Presents Podmania!
I have guaranteed that Quinn will be on the show for at least a few more episodes.